Well, Superintendent, thanks so much for sitting down and talking with us today. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
What's a word you'd use to describe the first 8-9 months you've been in the job now that you're knee-deep in it?
It's very fulfilling. Very fulfilling. It's the most difficult work in the world. Any job in the education industry is, but it's also the most rewarding.
Still glad you took the job?
Absolutely.
Okay. Why did you take the job? Well, you come from Westerville, a good school district. Obviously had its challenges, but the Columbus School, a lot of problems, pressing problems. Why take the job?
You know, every district has challenges, and the scale of those same challenges is larger in an urban setting, but the children of this city deserve a quality education, and I believe we have, with the community support, ways of helping them achieve their potential. And I think we've already demonstrated we're headed on that path to restoring the integrity and dignity of the education they get here and the fidelity of that, so that they'll be ready to get a job or go to college or enter the military service.
You came in with your eyes open. Obviously, you knew about the data doctoring investigation, obviously the budget problems. Were there any challenges that you've since discovered that you weren't aware of beforehand?
I was aware of the data challenge. I was aware that there was a levy proposed for the ballot in November. I was not aware of the need to reduce $50 million to achieve a balanced budget by 2018. That has been a focus, obviously, for us since failure of the levy.
When you came here, Westerville, I know, and Columbus share a lot of the same challenges, but one of the key differences is this disparity in the poverty levels is 3 times larger here in Columbus. How do you overcome the poverty?
Well, poverty is growing in every district, and I'm sure you're aware of that. And there certainly is a greater focus in academia on how to overcome some of the barriers that students growing up in poverty situations face, challenges that may not exist in non-poverty circumstances. Certainly it's a cause that's been taken on by many of the nonprofits in the city, as well as our private corporation partners and certainly the mayor's office. Most recently, we've done a community-wide study of the book How Children Succeed by Paul Tuff, and I'm in the Champion of Children's. That was the focus. He presented at that event, United Way's event, and what I am seeing is that more and more of the initiatives, the Infant Mortality Task Force, the housing task forces, are all focused on how we can overcome some of those challenges that occur in communities with high poverty. And we know that a lot of that, a lot of what helps us overcome those situations is the development of persistence and tenacity and grit, making certain that we develop that social capital in our families and support that, providing that sort of motivation and understanding that with efficacy you can overcome those challenges. And our role then is to provide the capacity to make certain our families can achieve that.
We'll talk a little bit about the budget now. $50 million to make up. Do you have any plans? Do you see going back to voters anytime this year?
We've not discussed a return to the ballot yet. We are doing taking a number of actions to, first of all, do an independent review of the 5-year forecast to assure that the assumptions are still appropriate, and so the numbers that reflect those assumptions in the 5-year forecast are valid numbers. That could change the overall deficit that we have to close. We have eliminated a number of positions beginning in July with 11 administrative positions, and we will be eliminating additional administrative positions this spring as we restructure the academic side of our organization and our external services to the community. We've engaged in a robust review of all programs and services funded by the general fund that exceed state minimums in an effort to understand which ones have the greatest impact on student achievement. And that's both academic and non-academic achievement, and which ones are scalable and sustainable, and which ones all students have access to. And we're taking a look at those, and we'll be making recommendations on reductions to some of those programs and services based upon those criteria I just named. We've begun thinking about, and in fact the board passed a resolution to provide a premium holiday to the classified employees of the organization. Of course, that because we have I don't want to say a flush insurance, self-insurance fund, but because we didn't require premium payments for 5 pay periods, Not only does the employee benefit from that, but the board, which makes a large contribution to those premiums, does not have to make those payments as well to the insurance fund, and therefore that money can be used to offset some of that deficit. So we're looking at every possible way to reduce the deficit before we close buildings.
What do you think some of the savings would be in that premium?
We can get the exact numbers for you. I don't have them in front of me, but the treasurer would have those.
Last night you had the final public hearing on the closing of the 7 schools. It's a hot topic right now, probably the biggest topic. Do you think you heard anything that would convince the board to change their plan, their proposal?
The board doesn't have a plan or proposal yet. I'll make that recommendation next Tuesday, and certainly very sincere in that we're listening to the community, and we've heard great qualitative as well as some quantitative input that will help us think about the proposal and make modifications to that proposal. So over the next 3 days, we'll be working on that. Hopefully be in a position early next week to make a final recommendation in resolution form to present to the board. But absolutely, we've already thought about some modifications in terms of feeder patterns and learned about other achievements, other accolades of some schools that would help influence that decision.
Let's remove the emotional component of a neighborhood losing a school. It's hard to do that, but we'll do it. What is a hard truth you would want these parents involved to understand about these schools?
Well, first of all, you cannot remove the emotion from it. There is a strong affinity, a strong attachment, and these schools are in neighborhoods, and so it's a part of the social fabric of our community, and so it's going to be difficult. As I searched my soul last night and this morning, I kept thinking about last night and obviously last week, the other community meeting, and there's the adage that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. We didn't see any indifference last night or last week. So I think it speaks to Masai, who was next to the last speaker's point, that this is about love and respect. People love their schools, they love the programs and services, they love what it's done for their communities. What we didn't hear, though, is that they love the particular building. They love that the location is in where it is, but not necessarily the physical structure. And I thought that was very affirming that this community is focused on the right things. What are those programs and services that exist in those locations that really enhance the quality of life and the quality of learning for our citizens? So I think it's been a very emotionally charged process. But I'm proud of this community because once again they stepped up and shared honestly and mostly appropriately what they felt and gave us new data points to consider. And that's what it takes, all of us coming together and collectively thinking about how to address this very real budget shortfall. And if we don't close buildings, we will have to find those resources in other places. And because 85% of our budget funds personnel, we would be looking at programs and services that result in reducing our personnel costs as a reduction. And so my obligation, and I believe our community's desire, is that we maintain those opportunities for our students to the best of our ability. And if we have to make some of those tough decisions about closing facilities that are underutilized without compromising the programs and services those children and those families have enjoyed, that's certainly what we should do.
So
Board policy requires that we
It does.
every 3 years
Yeah.
as well.
So there is a board
viability of the
policy.
school?
Yeah, the 3326.1 is a policy that on every 3 years we look at all of our facilities and the utilization of those facilities across 15 criterion. And that, of course, is what the process that was used in this.
Do you look at it with a harsher eye when you're facing a $50 million budget shortfall?
I've not been in the district
Right.
When they've gone through this process before. I certainly am obligated to look at any stone and turn over that stone to see if there's an opportunity to be more efficient without compromising the effectiveness.
How would you reassure parents, and you have to a certain extent, but how would you reassure parents now that are worried about this disruption in their children's education?
Yes. So life is full of those kinds of challenges, and I've had meetings with student leaders at Independence High School and also yesterday at Brookhaven High School, as well as with the faculty and staff at both those schools, and then our team have met with faculty and staff at all 7 sites. And of course we've had the 2 community meetings, and there'll be the board meeting next Tuesday, but we are very committed to working collaboratively on transitions And again, what we heard were so many of those programs, for example, the butterfly program that occurs at Mayberry, and how important that is. We want to make certain that we maintain, again, the integrity of those programs in that transition and support the students. The students are wonderful resources for understanding what makes sense. When I met with the student leaders, they suggested that the student leaders of the receiving schools come to the school that's closing or consolidating, and they visit together and talk about what are going to be those challenges and how do we address those together, and could there then be field trips and faculty and staff that get to meet each other and share projects that have become traditions at those schools, engage in the community likewise. But I think the important piece is that we do this as a community. The district doesn't own or feel like we have the magic elixir in this situation. We need to be communicating and understanding what those concerns are and working on how we address those together.